Hello and welcome to the John Ark Show. Today we're going to interview retired Russian KGB super spy Jack Barsky, aka Albrecht Dietrich. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel for free. You can also like, comment, and follow us. We're going to have a lot of great celebrity interviews coming up, so I encourage you to click on that notification bell so you can be notified every time we upload a new episode. We also ask that you post a link of today's show on all your social media to help spread the word. Now, let's say hello to Jack Barsky. Hello, Jack. Welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
I'm peachy keen. I'm enjoying the summer down here in Georgia.
Nice, nice. So are you ready for the severe interview you're about to experience?
Well, you're lacking the Klieg light, the strong light in my face. So
Well, maybe we'll get a bucket of cold water in case we need waterboarding.
okay, yeah, electric shock that might work.
All right.
But I'm so well trained, you wouldn't catch me that way.
Maybe it'll require some overtime. Okay, so here we go. Now, you've had a very interesting life as a former Russian KGB spy. How does one get chosen to become part of the KGB?
Yeah, I never in my wildest dreams thought of a career in espionage. It just was not part of my thinking, my forward thinking. And even if I had wanted to, in those days you couldn't apply to the KGB. I wouldn't have known where they are. So they sought me out. They found me in amongst the files of young college students where they were looking around to look for candidates. And based on what I found out much later, which came out of an interview that was given by my ex-boss, whom I never met. He was in charge of the Directorate S, which was underneath the first directorate, which was espionage. And he in the interview, he said they literally went through thousands of possible candidates to look for somebody with a set of character traits that might make them into a decent candidate, and so I was one of them. But it started all with intellect. I was an ace student. I aced college. I received a scholarship, a national scholarship that was limited to 100 concurrent users in the country. So I was a standout academically, and I was a party member, and I was active in the communist youth movement. So I seemed to be a good candidate. Now they had to find out, do I have all the other things that they were looking for?
Did you have a high aptitude for mathematics or sciences or something along those lines?
You know, yes, yes, and yes. I had a high aptitude for everything. I aced. I was very good at everything. And the one thing I didn't know that I was even that was my primary talent was the ability to learn another language and the ability to write and speak. We were focused in those days. We were focused in East Germany, where I grew up. We were focused on science, and so I was directed actively into into mathematics and particularly chemistry. But again, I did everything well except for dancing.
Most math majors are often terrible dancers, so don't feel bad. So, how extensive is the training program to become a spy? Was it like joining the Russian army, or did the KGB simply spend all its time teaching how to seduce beautiful American women just like James Bond? What were the core
Well,
studies?
there was no James Bond aspect to my training, and it was pretty much ad hoc. What they did very well was tradecraft, the stuff that you need to know to operate as an agent in a foreign country, which included things like learning learning Morse code, shortwave radio reception, photography, surveillance detection, secret writing, and on and on and on. That one was well done. I never saw a plan, by the way. It was sort of ad hoc. Next week you do this, and then you do that. And most interesting, the first book that they gave me to read was the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. That was interesting. And the second book they gave me to read was the Constitution of West Germany, because they wanted me to go to West Germany. The training, as I said, was ad hoc. I had 2 years worth of training in Berlin. A lot of the stuff was, if it wasn't technical, if I didn't need an instructor, it was all doing stuff by myself. I also got tasks, little tasks like to, say, follow somebody, make a contact with a person who I didn't know and find out, what they're all about and that kind of stuff. Ladies were not in the mix. Now, the East Germans did that. The Stasi did that. They had those Romeos who befriended middle-aged, lonely women, who most of whom were secretaries in the government someplace. That was not at all ever mentioned. The other thing I must tell you that they never gave me a psych test. And we never talked about psychology. It was all about, we picked you because you know people, you know what to do, you know how to make decisions on your own. So none of that, there was no training. There was also no training how to defeat a lie detector test. And the biggest deficiency was a lack of cultural training. In other words, I give you one example. Germans count like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Americans count like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. I found that out a long, long time after I actually resigned from the KGB. And they just didn't know what it was like to live as an American, because the ones who thought they knew were all, spies with diplomatic cover, so they were outside of American society. I had to learn this very, very slowly, and it took me about 5 years to feel comfortable as operating as an American and getting reasonably close and making friends.
So you became a KGB agent in, I think it's 1978. Is that correct? Is that
No, in 78 I came to the U.S.
Good.
I actually signed up in 73.
Gotcha. So you arrive in America and you see how incredible it is. The enormous grocery stores with unlimited food on display, the massive shopping malls, the fact that no two cars look alike, all the beautiful looking women. Did all of that shock you at the time compared to the relative poverty of everyday life in Russia back then?
Well, I had a preview. I spent 3 months in Canada. That's where they sent me to, to prevent me to, suffer from a great shock when I arrived in New York City.
What part of Canada did you go to?
Most of the time for 2 months, I was in Montreal, and then I traveled along the American-Canadian border to Sarnia and Windsor.
Yeah, Jack, I'm surprised you didn't defect immediately when you saw how good looking those Canadian women were. I'm shocked.
The German ladies were good looking too, and when I left the country, I was married to a very good looking wife who knew where I was going, and she decided she would wait for me.
Is that the Jamaican woman?
No, the Jamaican woman, I'm married to her now. Okay, so no, this was a blonde, wonderful looking, blue-eyed, sweet lady that I was in love with. And it took not another woman, but a little girl for me to leave her, but that comes later.
So I'm going to ask you a question that I suspect the FBI nor our intelligence agencies have ever asked you. Are you ready?
Okay, try.
What is your astrological sign?
They have not asked that. That's correct. My real birth month is May.
So what is that? Does that make you a Taurus?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. What sort of job did you get when you arrived in the U.S.?
Well, at first I didn't get one at all because I didn't have the required documentation. I came here with a certified copy of the Jack Barsky birth certificate, and then the next thing I got was a library card, which had an address on it. So with the birth certificate and the library card, I could get a driver's license, and and then I applied for Social Security, which in those days was okay. My first job, when I was able to apply for one, I spent 3 years working as a bike messenger in Manhattan. It's
Okay.
I became a street urchin, and I really got to know Manhattan really really well. So and interestingly enough, this was not a I wasn't an employee. I worked as a contractor, and I made enough money to fundamentally not require any infusion of cash by the KGB. That's always a dangerous operation.
Mm.
So now the next question was,
How did you start to integrate yourself into American social circles?
see, and the pick of becoming a bike messenger was not. It was just because that was a job that I could get without anybody asking a bunch of questions. You know, you didn't need a resume or anything like that. But what I was lucky in that I was my colleagues were not very curious people, and a lot of them not very intelligent. And I spent a lot of time waiting in the office for another delivery, and I just listened. And so I listened to what they're talking about: baseball, football, all this American stuff that I had to learn. And so those 3 years helped me a lot. And then I spent another 3 years attending college. City University in those days, and probably still the case, the City University of New York was like the United Nations. So there were Americans and there were all kinds of nationals from other countries or people that had immigrated. So that gave me another opportunity to pick up more hints and so forth. And by the time I had my first professional job, I was very comfortable, not only language-wise, but also behavior-wise and so forth, that I actually was ready to have a girlfriend and have some other friends with whom I could be reasonably close. And so it took a long time, and this was not deliberate. We didn't discuss this. This just happened. I got lucky that way because if I had tried to, be very active early on, I would have been found out.
Right. Is it fair to say that to be a great spy, you have to be a great actor who is capable of getting people to like and trust you very quickly?
Yes, 100% correct. I didn't know that, but uh, I found out much later that I'm pretty likable, and I'm a damn good liar because when left to my own devices, or when acting in normal life, I'm just brutally honest.
What is the key to getting people to like and trust you, especially if you have a suspicious sounding Russian accent after the
No,
Cold
no, no,
War?
no, no Russian, German
German.
accent,
All right.
right? I was born and raised in Germany.
Okay.
The accent that I came with did not necessarily sound German. And as a matter of fact, uh, most people who asked me about my accent were females. And then there were some that had been in Europe. So they heard some European. So the guess was, well, it could be German, it could be Flemish or Swedish or something like that. And when that came up, I had a very quick response to it. Just said, that makes a lot of sense. My mother was German.
Mm.
I grew up bilingual, and in fact, Jack Barsky's mother's last maiden name was Schwartz, so that worked out pretty well. So the accent was in New York. This does not raise any eyebrows because if you have been to New York, there are a lot of people with a rather heavy Hispanic accent who were born in New York.
So, what were some of the more dangerous missions the KGB sent you on?
Well, the dangerous mission was to just coming here and living here and pretending to be one of us, right? That was the danger. I had no single mission that raised
Nothing
the
that was
level of
life
danger.
threatening. Nothing that
No,
was life threatening.
no,
Okay.
no. No, the biggest threat that I faced was prison, but I never had any weapons training. These hands have not ever touched a weapon.
Interesting. So, while you were in the U.S., how long did it take before you appeared on the FBI's radar screen?
Okay, it took I quit the KGB after 10 years, and it took the FBI another 6 years to find out that I exist, and that was based on a information smuggled out of the KGB archives by a Russian defector.
Hang on. What is the statute? 6 years, interesting. What is the statute of limitations on espionage? Was it more or less than 6 years?
As a matter of fact, they couldn't have convicted me of espionage. There was no proof that I had ever acted as a spy. The only thing that they had on me, which I really didn't know, they told me after we became friends. The only thing that they had on me was that I was in the country illegally. So they would have kicked me out. I thought, once they said hello, I figured, there was a good chance that I might go to jail. But it makes sense. There was no proof. They didn't observe me being engaged in espionage activities. They didn't find any paraphernalia because I had thrown everything away. So I was just illegally in the country.
But yet somehow they leveraged information out of you and got you to
They
admit
did.
to what you were doing. What was the leverage? Throwing you out of the country, was that the leverage?
No, 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 no. Look, at the time they said hello to me. That was 9 years after I said goodbye to the KGB. I had lost my communist ideology 100%. So, and I had actively worked on living my version of the American dream. So I had a good-looking wife. She was from South America, from Guyana, and two good-looking children, and a house in the country. And so I had no reason whatsoever not to cooperate.
And you achieved all of that on a bicycle messenger's salary?
No, no, no. I became a programmer after I
Oh, okay.
graduated. I graduated with a degree in business administration, specialization computer systems. And oh, by the way, this is always an interesting little tidbit. I graduated as valedictorian.
Really? What,
That,
what,
that's pretty.
what
That's pretty
college?
darn stupid.
What university?
Baruch College, City University of New York. I shouldn't have done that because I had to give the graduation speech at Madison Square Garden in front of a lot of people. And here's a guy who was 10 years older than the other graduates, roughly, who raced through the program in 3 years. It was a 4-year program, and who does have a bit of an accent, and nobody was just curious about, how did you do this? Where did you come from? Nothing. I should not have done this. I got away with a big mistake.
So I know you've never met President Putin, but how would you compare the 1990 version of Putin to today's Putin?
He has he, he has he has developed an incredible belief in his own self, in as well as the myth that he spread about who he is, where he came from, the KGB background and all this. So he is now, and that's a huge vulnerability because when you are the smartest, always the smartest person in the room, you're going to wind up losing. And I think he's beyond he's beyond the peak of his ability to make decisions and to rule Russia.
So, what did you think when you saw Russia invading Ukraine? Did you think this would end quickly, or is this going to be Afghanistan 2.0?
I thought, like most everybody, it might end quickly, but that would not be the end of the war. You are absolutely right. Afghanistan 2.0, no doubt, simply because I know the history of between Ukraine and Russia. They were always feuding cousins, so to speak. They are very similar, but similar history, similar culture, similar language, same religion. But what happened under Stalin made Ukrainians absolutely hate everything coming out of Russia. Are you familiar with the famine?
Yeah.
But for the sake of your audience, I just want to give a little background. When Stalin came to power, he focused on two things internally: forced industrialization and the collectivization of the peasantry. And peasants are the hardest group to collectivize because peasants own land and they own livestock. They don't want to have this taken away. That's like taking the earth away from them. So Stalin had a long war with the peasantry in Russia, but even more so in Ukraine. And so he decided in 1931 and 1932 to force them into compliance by taking all the food away from them and starving to death over 4 million Ukrainians. That gives you an idea how much hatred there is amongst Ukrainians for Russians. And no matter, even if Putin will be able to, and I don't think he will, but if he will be able to occupy the entire country, that war will never end.
Yeah. And also, peasants and a lot of Eastern Europeans have very powerful religious beliefs that they are often willing to die for. So that's another wrench in his plans.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
So we're hearing that Russian soldiers in Ukraine are now so disgusted by things that they are actively disobeying the orders of their superiors. If that's true, what is your assessment of that?
Well, they don't know what they're fighting for.
Yeah.
And they're being told, to target civilians. And they don't want to do that. They're not all bad. There are some really evil folks amongst the Russian army, but most of them are normal people, and they're conscripts. And all of a sudden they're told, you shoot this woman and kill this child. I don't want to do that. Why?
Yeah, and also a lot of them are not being fed or paid. And that's a huge disincentive to slaughtering innocent people. Do you believe the war in Ukraine can be ended quickly in any way?
I doubt. I mean, you see that the Ukrainian army is a lot smaller, but they're much more professional. I mean, it's amazing how long they have held the Russians back. And I mean, Putin wanted Kiev, and he's not getting it.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you want to protect your wife and children. You'll fight to the death for that.
Yes, and that will not stop. And they do have a leader who is playing the role of his life, and he's very good at it. He's an actor. He's a patriot, and he's using his acting skills to make the whole world is like looking at him as in awe. And he outacts Putin in a big way.
If you had to guess, do you believe that Russia will stop with Ukraine, or will it continue westward?
I don't know if they have the ability to continue on either westward or into the Baltic republics. He's got all of us to deal with.
Yeah. So if this war drags on for a long time, who poses the greatest threat to Putin? Is it the oligarchs? Is it the Russian military? Or do you think the Russian people will turn on him?
All right. The oligarchs are feckless. They exist. They are oligarchs because Putin allowed them to be oligarchs. So a lot of them live in the West, and all of a sudden have no means to. They're running out of money. So it's not the oligarchs. It's not the Russian people, and I give you my rationale behind that determination. You said it before, history repeats itself. Adolf Hitler had 10 years to brainwash at the time, the most sophisticated, most educated population of any country at the time. When the Allied forces occupied Germany, it took a long time to denazify the German state and to get Nazi ideology out of people's heads. Putin had 22 years, and we will not. Nobody's. I mean, he has spun this ideology that everybody believes in. The majority of the Russians believe that there are Nazis in running Ukraine. Now, it's a fact that there are Nazis in Ukraine. So here's the thing: you tell a big lie, and at core there is a little bit of truth, makes the lie more believable. So the Russian people will stick with Vladimir, guaranteed. I think the military may have a chance to do that. Now, here's one. Let's not hope for this, because you know how many attempts on Hitler's life he escaped? 42.
It's amazing.
So it's very difficult to you need to have a number of people in the know what is going on. That means you got to trust that not one of them will actually betray. And a lot of the German attempts they failed because of betrayal.
So I'm hearing that Putin has purged more than 100 of his generals, and that he has tripled the number of soldiers he has protecting his home and his other residences,
Yep.
and that he's changing his food tasters on a regular basis. So this, to me, paints the picture of a man who is constantly worried about everything. And he's probably right to be worried, because I suspect there's a lot of anger around him. What do you think?
You said it. I mean, the man is very smart, and he knows that dictators can be killed. It goes all the way back to Rome, right? Regicide. So, and he's doing and as we agreed, the guy is very smart, so he's doing all the right things to protect himself.
So let's pretend for a second that you're a Chinese military strategist, and you see what's unfolding now between Russia and the Ukraine. How much do you downgrade your perception of Russian military strength after you see what Ukrainians are doing to the Russian army?
I clearly there's a downgrade, but there's a secondary thought here. As long as the United States, is preoccupied with what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine, as long as that happens, we may lose focus on what might happen vis-a-vis Taiwan, right? And right now we're sending a phenomenal amount of weaponry to Ukraine. We should also be sending a lot of weapons to Taiwan proactively, and not wait until maybe China invades there.
So it's our understanding that the U.S. and NATO are now sending very heavy weapons to Ukraine.
Yep.
How do you think Putin will respond to this?
Difficult to say. On a daily basis, there's somebody in Russia directly or indirectly threatening nuclear war. They should be smart enough to know that nuclear war means mutual annihilation.
The Russians are constantly talking about the possibility of using tactical nukes on the Ukraine. But here's why I believe they'll never do it. Russia is east of the Ukraine. If they start detonating tactical nukes on Ukrainian soil, then the prevailing winds will carry all that radiation back to Russia. and it'll kill their food, their crops, their water, and their people. So to me, it's a hollow threat.
That I never heard anywhere in the media. That's a really good point.
Yeah,
When you said east, I immediately thought about the prevailing winds. So
yeah.
because I lived in Europe like for quite a while.
So, what advice can you give the American government that you believe might help them catch more spies like you in the future?
It's not the government. The government can do. We're talking counterintelligence, the military intelligence, the FBI, and even the CIA. We got a problem in this country. We are not security conscious.
Yeah,
We are very trusting. We are very naive, and this part of the American DNA because we were never, other than Hawaii, we were never invaded by a foreign power. The Europeans have this history of having been invaded from this way, that way, and the other, and they're more security conscious. I wish we had about half of the security alertness that the Israelis have,
yeah,
because fundamentally, most successes in espionage are based on human error and humans and people trusting people that they shouldn't trust, and people not be aware of that this guy is a little odd. Like look, the two worst cases of espionage in the United States were two moles. Was Aldrich Ames, a mole in the CIA, who gave away a lot of secrets, and now I forgot the name. The other guy was in the FBI. Both of them showed behavior that even their CIA colleagues ignored.
if you had to guess, how many Russian spies do you think are still secretly working in the United States?
I'm thinking well over 1,000.
Interesting.
First of all, um, what I perceive is that Russia is doesn't have the same resources the Soviet Union had. To train somebody like me was very expensive, and train and maintain, and we really didn't achieve much. So and the situation nowadays in the world is different. There's a lot of fluidity. There's a lot of Russians that come to the United States as students or artists or business people, and Russia is still a closed society. So the Russian government knows who's going where.
If you had to guess, how many Chinese spies do you think are working in the U.S.?
Even more, because how many Chinese students are in the country? I forgot. It's a pretty big number.
Yeah, exactly. How did the FBI discover you? What tipped them off to what you were doing?
Well, there was a defector from Russia who was employed by the KGB archive, and he smuggled a whole bunch of information out of the archives and handed it over to British intelligence. And amongst that information, there were only like three items. There's my name, and that I was an illegal and I was living in the Northeast of the United States. That's all. And because Barsky is the relatively rare name, the FBI didn't take long to find me.
Now, unlike most Russian spies who were caught, you never went to prison. Did you have an extraordinary lawyer? Did you have some secret leverage? How did you avoid going to prison?
No, 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 no. So when the FBI first contacted me and we sat down for quote unquote the first interview, I immediately volunteered aggressively. I said, listen, I know one thing. I have one chance to get out of this mess slight, with very little damage, and also save my family from, being this, the kids becoming wardens of the state, and my then wife being kicked out of the country because he became a citizen through me. So I said, the only chance I have here is if I cooperate with you 100%, and I will do so. There was no quid pro quo at that time. They didn't promise me anything, but I I clearly, in many interviews that we had, they asked me about every little detail of my life and my training and what I did in the United States. They knew that I was being honest, and then I passed a polygraph test,
Right.
which is very important for the FBI. And at that point they said, well, you gave us enough. You as a result, there's a path to citizenship for you.
Right. Some people suspect, I should say, that the real reason the Russians haven't killed you yet is because you may still be secretly working for them. How do you respond to these suspicions?
And I have not heard it spoken that clearly. First of all, as far as the Russians were concerned, up until 6 years ago, when I became a public figure, I was actually dead, because the story that I told them when I refused to go back behind the Iron Curtain, I told them I shouldn't come because I have HIV/AIDS. So they decided that I was going to die, because in those days it was a death sentence. So now it's so many years later. If there is a list somewhere in the Kremlin where they have names on them who to go after, I would be at the very bottom, because my case is very old, and I'm German and not Russian. I did not betray the motherland. Okay, that brings with it the death penalty if you betray the motherland. So while I'm in the United States or even in Western Europe, I feel quite safe. If you offered me $1 million to make a trip to Moscow, I would say no, thank you very much.
In your opinion, are the greatest spies highly intelligent people like you, or are they simply the most ruthless killers?
Well, it depends what the task is. The spies that go after secrets are not the same people that kill. The killers have different training. The James Bond that combines both of them does not exist. So, and I think if you want to be a successful spy, you need to have some intellectual capability. You need to be able to manipulate people. That means you need to understand people. You need to foresee the consequences of your actions. In other words, I survived as long as I did. I'm the longest surviving illegal, by the way. I broke the record by 9 years. And what helped me survive is my ability to anticipate anything that could go wrong, with some exceptions, like becoming a valedictorian. That was pretty dumb, but anything that could go wrong, and then proactively change behavior so it won't go wrong. So yeah, you need to have a half a brain to do that.
By the way, you mentioned, earlier we discussed your ability to get people to like and trust you. What
Yep.
were your techniques for accomplishing that? Were there some
Oh,
techniques that you used to
yeah.
endear people?
When you meet a new person, you show your hands like this, and even when I stopped the spying thing, and I was a corporate actor, and I met a new person that could be on the phone or in person, I would always tell them something, share something with them that most people would not share, because it supposedly makes you vulnerable, some weakness, in the conversation, and that opens people up. It's real simple.
Yeah. I've interviewed retired FBI agents who worked undercover against the Italian mafia. In your opinion, who poses more of a security threat to the U.S.? Is it the Italian mafia, the Russian mafia, or the Chinese spies?
Chinese.
Yeah.
The Russian mafia is, and I know quite a few FBI folks, retired FBI folks also. The Russian mafia is the most ruthless gangster organization on the planet, but they don't really pose a big security threat. The Chinese absolutely do. They're much more sophisticated and much more. They have a much more long-term view of history, going back and projecting forward.
You know, I've been into nightclubs that were heavily frequented by Russian mobsters, and I've been to nightclubs that were heavily frequented by Chinese mobsters. And I have to say, the room temperature in the Chinese nightclubs was probably 30 degrees colder than it was in any other nightclub I've ever been to, just because you can feel and sense that sinister vampire-like energy in the room. It's very interesting.
I can see that. And there's one other thing. I don't think the Chinese drink a lot of alcohol because they apparently they have a gene that makes it very difficult for them to handle alcohol. I have a friend who is half Chinese. He drinks one glass of beer and he's red in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. So if any of your children came to you and said, Dad, by the way, do you have children?
I have 5 of them.
So if any of them came to you and said, Dad, I want to become a spy, what would you say to them?
You're crazy. Don't even think about it. No. The only spy that doesn't walk away from that career with being damaged in some way would be the analyst who takes information and analyzes it in an office, right? If you are engaged in lying and deceiving and manipulating people and pretending somebody to be somebody who you're not, and you will eventually, there's damage.
Before we wrap this up, is there anything you would like to promote?
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to do that. My memoir is called Deep Undercover. It's available on Amazon. It's a really good read. It has a 4.6 rating on Amazon, and there's 600 ratings, so that's not friends and family. There's people who read the book. And the other thing is my audio documentary. That's like a podcast there's 12 episodes. It's also about my life, but it's narrated. And it has interviews with all kinds of people, not just me, but other people who played an important role in my life. Probably the most interesting one is the FBI fellow who was in charge of my investigation, who is a good friend of mine now. And that's called The Agent, and you can get to it on all major streaming audio platforms.
By the way, have any producers approached you about putting any of your books or your life story on film in a movie?
Well, this is sort of underway now because the company that made the podcast is Hollywood-based, and they have a history of starting out with a podcast and then making this into a movie or a series. So people are working on it. There's never a guarantee, but it's a serious effort. That would be wonderful.
Well, Jack, I want to thank you for coming on the John Ark Show. This was a lot of fun. And I want to wish you all the best with your future ventures, provided they don't involve any more espionage. And thanks again for coming on the show.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.